Welcome to 2023, everybody. I chose an image for the background today that, for some, is going to have more relevance than for others. But we are currently in a Mercury retrograde cycle that began a little bit ago. Let's see. Well, it began actually quite recently on the 29th of December. So how do we think? That's Mercury. How do we perceive things? And how do we communicate about those things that we think and perceive? That is Mercury's function. Actually, it's one of Mercury's functions. And the image that I chose particularly might have relevance to those of us that are, how shall I put this, perhaps a bit more smitten with the actual energies of Mercury. And Mercury's in Capricorn right now, which is authority, the authority paradigm. And it is likely that, beginning of the year, we're setting intentions for what it is, what are our resolutions for 2023, what do we want to accomplish, those kinds of things, and achieving clarity in those realms is not something that's just going to, be handed to you on a silver platter. You must go in this direction because if you do, you will enhance the experience of what it means to be alive. Oh no, that would be just a wee bit too easy. And since we are in a Mercury retrograde cycle, there will be folks, there will be situations and instances that are presented to you that say, oh, you wanted to go in that direction. Well, if that's really the case, then perhaps there are some things that you might consider that are going to get in your way. And since that is one of the options, here they are. And welcome to a Mercury retrograde cycle in Capricorn. There's a function of organization that, it's been moving along as it needs to move along in order to maintain a level of control on things that doesn't easily or readily say, look, there's something new. Why don't we experiment with it? Oh no, far from it. There is more likely to be that staid and steady system that has been in place for perhaps way too long, that is not ready to jump into the or through the hoops and hurdles of a new adventure. And yet, here we are. We're at the beginning of 2023. New adventure is there. It's beckoning our attention. But not so fast. First, we have to make sure that we're really clear on what it is that those new beckoning adventures are trying to draw us toward. Are they clear? Might there be things that are on the table that need some refinement before we leap headlong into the new adventure that 2023 has been awaiting us to adventure into? Thus, the image that I chose in the back, the great Pacific Ocean. A wave coming in meets a wave going out. I think that's an apt image for this particular Mercury retrograde cycle. Boom! Is there a collision? Sometimes there is. And the energy that is what should we say, released in that moment of collision. Are you tapped in enough to be able to utilize that energy? Because the energy is there. You know, in looking at the astrology for 2023, I duly noted we began, right near the beginning of a Mercury retrograde cycle for this year, and the year ends right near the end of a Mercury retrograde cycle. There are four, count that, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 Mercury retrograde cycles that transpire this year, almost in totality. There are some astrologers that lean into the idea of the shadow period of a retrograde cycle, which means when a planet first crosses the degree where it's going to go back to retrogradian, then it has entered the shadow period, and you start to get some of the inklings of what this retrograde cycle is about. I don't lean into that theory very strongly. I know there are some astrologers that do, but if you did for just the Mercury cycle of retrogrades this year, a large, a substantially large percentage of the year is spent within that Mercury retrograde moment. And some of us that are perhaps just a little bit more tuned into the mercurial dance than others may feel that 2023 is a year that kind of energy is challenging to what it is that they want to do, what it is that they want to say. And perhaps for those of you leaning into that direction, utilize Mercury's, how shall I say it, more colorful side to engage with others in the communicative levels of interaction, to test the waters, so to speak, as to what might be appropriate and what might not, because not everything is appropriate for every moment. I won't say that not everything is inappropriate, because I don't think that really carries a lot of muster. So, and I wasn't saying mustard. Let's take a look at the chart really quickly here, because there are really only a couple of planetary experiences, like usual, that I have a tendency to lean into, as opposed to looking at the whole friggin' chart. The 2 elements that transpire during this first week of 2023 are that tomorrow Venus moves into Aquarius. That is one. And you can kind of see the moon moving along here. And on that same day that Venus moves into Aquarius, we have a conjunction between the moon and the Mars retrograde cycle that is going to transpire somewhere along the way. That's not one of the aspects I was going to talk about. Moon is heading toward a full moon this week. It happens on the 6th, which, if I look at my calendar, that's Friday. So Friday, full moons. Let's just take a look at Friday. Fridays are the kind of day like, hey, it's the end of the work week. This is a time to kick back and enjoy, go out and go on a date, go out and experience the process of what does it mean to, kick it up a notch. Take chances, go out there, find romance. And the moon, full moon, looking for romance, always on the table. Don't forget that. So, those are the 2 aspects that this week brings onto the table. However, just looking at, I'm going to cover another aspect, because rarely will I mention in these processes Chiron, which is down here in 11 degrees, almost 12 degrees of Aries. You can see that here on today, It's in partile square, that's this pink line here, to the sun down here. And ways to play the chironic dance that life brings for us. The common vernacular that is often attributed to Chiron is the wounded healer. And there are many of us that have a tendency to lean into the wound and not so much the healer side of that little short wounded healer phrase. And, in the formative years of life, the leaning into the wounded side of the equation is not unheard of, because where Chiron is or was when you were born puts a pushpin, shall we say, into your chart matrix that says, in this location, it is conceivable that there is some form of wounding that transpires. What kind of wounding? Well, you have to look and see what sign was it in, what degree is it at, what house is it in. Excuse me. But more generally, the first wound that Chiron, archetypal Chiron, experienced in his life was that when he was born, his mom didn't want to have anything to do with him. And his dad was just kind of like Zeus saying, well, I don't have time to deal with him. So the first wound that Chiron often represents in whatever part of your chart that it's in is like abandonment by the parents. That parental factor is not most comfortably engaged in that particular portion of a person's life. Is it in the seventh house? Is it in Libra? Does the experience of parental negation or abandonment happen in the field of what does it mean to be in relationship? This is just for an example. Well, right now, Chiron is in Aries, so that driving energy that Aries represents is, that's what's up as far as the Chiron energy goes. There's the impulse to do things is saying, depending on which side of the Chironic equation you come down on, is like, I'm wounded in that area. I don't feel comfortable putting myself out there into the experience of exploring the adventures of what life has for me. Or, from the healing side of the experience, is there the option that I might be able to provide a soothing balm of healing into a situation that requires from me, from the Aries perspective, that I grasp what it means to contain that driving energy in a fashion that I can utilize it to enhance the process of that adventure that life beckons all the time for my participation in. The square from the sun that today is underway, the sun, the vitality of life, up there in Capricorn, that realm of control in a square to this Chiron energy of either a wound or a healing protocol. Am I here to be wounded by what the larger level of organization has in place? Or am I here to cast an energy of healing into that realm that isn't caught up in all the manifestations of challenge to this and challenge to that and all the opportunities to succumb to the power over scenario? Your choice. Remember, Mercury's retrograde. These two waves, one going in and one going out, are colliding. And are you able to tap into the energy release that represents and utilize it effectively, proactively to be a healer? Essay question. You have to answer that yourself. I cannot answer that for you. Anyway, that's just an aside I wanted to get into as we got into the week. Tuesday, which is where I was headed to begin with. Venus, the protocol of what does it mean to relate. And I don't mean to just the experience of what does it mean to be in relationship. Yes, that is in the equation, but to relate to everything, to anything. Venus is art. Are you related to what it is that artistically seeks expression through you? The Venus going into Aquarius says that pay attention. Do you sense any capacity to innovate in that whole artistic relating kind of scenario? Because while I, Venus, am going through Aquarius, I beckon you to, take a chance. Be experimental. What does the energy of your group have to say? Are you a participant in that energy? Because while in Aquarius, that option is on the table. Take a chance. Venus in Aquarius. It's opening up levels of awareness. There's the energy. We're in a new year. There's something new that's trying to come over the horizon. And Venus is saying, wow, I wonder who I might be able to hook up with in a creative enough fashion that we're going to be able to invent something dynamic and new in this moment. There's Venus. It's on the table. It's playing the game. Are you willing to play the game with it? Because Venus going into Aquarius, take chances. Be curious. Invent something. And the other thing, of course, that comes along this week is the full moon, which happens right on Friday. You can kind of see the moon down here at 12 degrees of Cancer. Sun's at 16. The moon moves basically a degree every 2 hours. So 4 hours from now, which is basically around noon on Friday, the full moon's going to be underway at 16 degrees of Cancer. We should probably take a look and see what does that Sabian symbol for the degree where this full moon is at put on the table, put on our plate for, what kind of energy does Friday evening potentially hold in store for me if I energetically tune into what that Sabian symbol for the full moon might tickle as an option to work with, to play with, to investigate. The Sabian symbol reads, the unfoldment of multi-level potentialities issuing from an original germ. The keynote, the life urge to actualize one's birth potential. Can you feel Friday night? Do you feel the energy percolating within you to stimulate who you really are, what that potential you were born with was and is? And are you in a position to be able to bring that into this full lunar light that day and evening in an effective enough way that you are enhanced by what it is your potential really is? Further write up on this. What is pictured here is simply the process of germination. As it unfolds from the sundered seed, the plant pierces the crust of the soil and reaches up towards the light. Just as an aside, we right now are on that waning side, or let's say the waxing side of the sun increasing in light each day. This is a dynamic process turned outward in contrast to the more static or introspective process of integration through understanding, depicted in the preceding symbol, which reads a man studying a mandala in the front of him with the help of a very ancient book. Germination is the crucifixion of the seed. The seed becomes the germ, just as the Tibetan student meditating silently and peacefully on the mandala is followed by the Christian crusader, and at a materialistic level of productivity by the engineer technologist intent upon transforming the globe for the greatest possible enjoyment of the greatest possible number of beings. This is kind of an interesting consideration because that is essential, Capricorn, for the greatest possible enjoyment of the greatest possible number of human beings. That is, that's at the core of the potential of Capricorn. But we're in Cancer for this particular full moon. As usual, the second stage of the fivefold sequence establishes a contrast with the first. Action polarizes meditation. The expanding process of self-actualization, which may mean nothing more than ego expansion through conquest, contrasts with the introspective study of the structural relationship between and the meaning of the various energies and potentialities of one's nature. The key word is growth. So you have to ask yourself, with this impulse or driving energy that this full moon on Friday is going to stimulate, am I going to be able to, from the, where the sun is, that Capricorn integrity side, be able to engage with life at a level where I am fully in expression, seeking to be what it is that I potentially came into this life to be. And in that experience, am I going to be able to contain myself enough? Because after all, it is Friday night. In order to enhance the processes that seek to unfold in those Friday night adventures. Another essay one. I cannot give you the answer to this. This will be entirely up to you. You have to ask yourself, where is that 16 degrees of Cancer in my chart? Is it in my 9th house? Do I sense the impulse to adventure beyond the realms of containment? Is it in my 12th house? Am I going to discover a process whereby I can dive deep into the experiences of where that meditation might lead me? Is it in my 3rd house? Am I going to be inspired, in spite of the Mercury being retrograde still, to engage in meaningful conversations with others, to explore factors that, remember, Venus is in Aquarius, explore factors that are going to stimulate some level of, developing a new format for the process of how we interact with one another. Are we going to, be able to invent something in what it is that we create together? These are some of the factors on the table for this week that I'm focusing on for you. The planets, the Mercury and the Venus and the Moon, Chiron, and I would also have to let you know that as I was looking at the whole year of 2023 ahead, Mars, basically, which is out of bounds now, is actually going to be out of bounds until May 5th. That's a long cycle of being out of bounds. And you say, well, what does out of bounds mean? Out of bounds means that the planet is really not too interested in the rules and regulations as to what is appropriate. There's an adventurousness in the energy quest that's on the table. And Mars, we're talking Mars, which is in Gemini now. It'll go through a couple more signs before it gets out of the process of being out of bounds. So, Mercury, remember? Retrograde right now. Mars out of bounds in the sign of Gemini, ruled by Mercury. Our curiosity is something that, from a Mars perspective, there's a drive about, because that's how Mars rules. It gives us, Aryan type impulse, a drive to really, stir the pot. And Mars right now is at the degree where it's going to station a little later on this month at 8 degrees of Gemini. And it would be good probably to just peek at what it is, because it's really not going to move very far. It's going to still be at 8 degrees when it turns direct on the 12th of this month, so next week. Here's the Sabian symbol for what that Mars sitting right there on that degree of Gemini reads. A quiver filled with arrows. And the keynote, man's aggressive relationship to natural life as a basis for survival and conquest. And kind of, you might sense, the potential for just more than a wee bit of angst to someone who's kind of like so tuned into the peaceful side of being alive. And Mars is kind of like, who's got time for that? I got this driving energy. It is still retrograde, even though it's not moving anywhere until it stations and goes direct. It's bringing to focus, and you can kind of say, well, Venus has gone into Aquarius, not exactly that Martian energy, but perhaps, we might have a quiver filled with arrows that are tipped with the capacity to enhance engagement in love and life. And we're going around utilizing those arrows like Cupid to bring a level of curiosity, openness, innovation into the experience of what is available for us to investigate. We can do that with some drive as well. After all, we're talking Mars here. Mars and Venus. They're always in play with one another in some fashion, even though we may not say, they have an aspect to one another. They're always talking to one another. Have masculine and feminine parts of us. They're vying for attention, or they're trying to facilitate a process where we can find some tenure of relatively even ground, where we can engage with both effectively. First week of 2023, that's the astrology that comes from me to you and from the planets saying, hello, let's see what we can invent while 2023 unfolds. Are you on board? Let's go for it. That's all I have for now. See you next week. Bye.